Our story begins with Earth entering a glacial era, as global temperatures continue to fall. A reporter asks people to stay hopeful, claiming that the government will not abandon them and that they will survive this disaster. But honestly, if it depended on the government, everyone would die. At that moment, a frozen airplane suddenly crashes onto a man. Our protagonist Hanfin was watching all this on his frozen TV when someone called his name. When he opened the door, it was a girl named Ruinar. He asked what she was doing there, urging her to come inside quickly, as it was very dangerous outside. Suddenly she kissed him. Embarrassed, he asked what the hell she was doing. She said she realized Hanfin was the only person worth loving in that apocalypse, and only in hard times could she see who she truly loved. She claimed she would do anything for Hanfin, then suddenly kneed him between the legs. He had no idea how that was supposed to make someone feel good, but fine. Hanfin said he was happy that she finally understood her feelings. However, she told him not to say anything, only to close his eyes. The moment he did, a man struck and killed him. Shocked, Ryunar asked why he had killed Hanfin. The man told her to stop pretending, since deep down she knew he was going to die. In this world there were no more rules, and nobody cared about human life anymore. They said they needed to search for hidden supplies. Meanwhile, Hanfin realized he could no longer move. Maybe he was already dead. This was the experience of death. His last sight was of Ruinar and that man together, like a couple. He thought that in the end everything was because of that heartless woman, but in his next life, he vowed not to be useless anymore. Suddenly he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. It was warm, and he wondered if it might be the path to heaven, but when he touched it, a red glow appeared, and he woke up terrified in his own bed. Seeing the sunset, he thought he would never witness it again. He confirmed that it was June 28, and the apocalypse would begin on July 15. He realized he had returned 1 month before it all began. However, this rebirth came with something strange. From the moment he woke up, there was a strange light in his hand. Even though it was warm, it did not bring discomfort and seemed to have no purpose. But when he sneezed, his hand turned green. The green light grew stronger, making him feel like his body was collapsing. Desperate, he shook his hand to make it disappear. He thought he had seen something like this in a comic before, where the protagonist was reborn with a cheat-like ability, but when he picked up a knife, nothing happened. His stomach growled from hunger, and when he opened the fridge, it was completely empty. On the table, he noticed roasted soybeans. They wouldn't fill him, but he ate them anyway. To his surprise, a plant sprouted. He couldn't understand what had happened, but his fatigue vanished, and the green light disappeared. Opening the plant, he realized it was a soybean sprout. Perhaps this was the power of his ability. Amazed, he thought he had to study it later, but for now, gathering supplies before the apocalypse was more important. Later, he reflected on what had happened. First, a red light had appeared in his right hand. Then it turned green, making his heart race and exhausting him. But when he held soybeans, they sprouted. Maybe this was his power. At that very moment, Ryunar appeared, saying it was a coincidence to meet him again and that it seemed they were meant for each other. Hanfin thought about how she had been a goddess to him, someone he chased for 3 years. He would have done anything to satisfy her, even though deep down, the girl was only using him, but he never expected that she would be the reason for his death in the end. However, now was not the time for revenge. Since he needed supplies, Ruinar asked if he was awake, but Hanfin covered it up by saying that she looked more beautiful, and that was why he had been distracted. Ruinar then suggested that since they had met, they should go out. Hanfin refused, saying not today, which even surprised her. He thought that she was only trying to use him again to make him pay for everything, but this time he would not be foolish. He remembered that the city's supermarket was the largest and most stocked in the eastern region. When the Ice Age began, the entire supermarket was emptied overnight, and in the end, no one was ever able to find out who did it. With only a few days left before the apocalypse, he needed to stock up on as many supplies as possible. He had already written down the things he needed: warm clothes, medicine, daily necessities, and fuel. But his biggest problem was that he didn't have any money. Then he realized that his loan limit had increased, and so he began applying for every loan he could. Meanwhile, Ryunar was furious that Hanfin had ignored her. How could a poor boy without even a car dare to treat her that way? But at that moment, Hanfin appeared in a brand new car and called out to her. She was shocked, asking if that car was really his. Hanfin nodded and said yes, he had just bought it. He claimed that his father had been making a lot of money doing business in America, and that he had only gone to the airport to see his father off. Leonor began acting, saying she didn't know that, and then she started crying. He told him he had been so cold to her earlier, and she thought he was distancing himself from her as a friend. Hanfin then pulled her closer, saying that he could never distance himself from her because she was too important to him. That was exactly what she wanted to hear. Leonor then said that Hanfin was actually a very special person to her, and she asked if he would like to have dinner and watch a movie with her that night. But at that moment, Hanfin had already vanished completely. From the other side, while arranging his car, he simply said that he was very busy today. She then asked why he had bought so many things. Hanfin replied that it was nothing. Just some things he liked, but also mentioned that he had bought a gift for her. Runar smiled and said she would wait for her present at her house. As she left, she thought she had easily deceived Hanfin, but Hanfin was thinking that he could not let Runar discover his supplies because he needed them to survive the apocalypse. He swore that he would settle accounts with her and the man who killed him once the apocalypse arrived. Now, he was starting to feel optimistic. On the day the apocalypse began, it would snow heavily and the temperature would drop to 20°C. In the following month, the temperature would gradually fall to +70°C, leaving the world completely covered in snow and making it impossible to go outside. That was why he needed to stockpile enough food and pack everything in boxes so that no one would discover them. He had to do this personally, at night, to avoid being noticed. Since there would be no electricity during the apocalypse, he bought a generator and stored enough fuel for a year. During that time, heating systems would also stop working, so he modified his house to keep it warm. He reinforced the doors and windows, and he also needed a special room to store all his supplies. By the time he finished everything, it was already the 14th, with only one day left before the drastic temperature drop. Hanfin said that the next step would be the main event, but he knew that, to survive the apocalypse, the supplies he had gathered would not be enough. His ability to transform soybeans into plants would be his true hope for survival. With a plate in front of him, he said that this was the soybean he had created using his ability. He admitted that he still didn't fully understand his power, but first, he needed to determine whether it was edible or not. When he tasted it, it was indeed edible, just as he had expected. But now he needed to figure out how to properly use that ability. So far he had only experimented with soybeans, but he needed to try it on other foods as well. After several hours he was kneeling, clutching his head in pain as it felt like his ability was overloading both his body and his mind. Finally, he gained some understanding of his power. Before passing out, he had experimented on many types of food. Some showed no reaction, while others, like soybeans, evolved from seeds into mature cultivated plants. But sometimes things went wrong. Occasionally, the reaction would cause an explosion, turning the food into a black substance that looked like charcoal, though much lighter. That black substance could actually be burned, which meant he no longer had to worry about energy for heating. After that, he continued experimenting many more times and realized that the chances of success were very random and he couldn't figure out a pattern, but there had to be something behind this ability. At least he now had some understanding of the conditions required to activate it, and the key point seemed to be his consciousness. He needed to imagine himself in nature, and what he imagined was directly connected to the results. He then tried experimenting with meat this time, but there was no reaction. Maybe it only worked with plants. Still, he said he could clearly feel the existence of two colors when meditating, and he had not yet tested the red color he had seen in the beginning. After concentrating, he finally managed to activate the red light, but the meat he experimented on turned into something disgusting, and he immediately threw it to the ground. He realized that the red light resembled heat, but it wasn't ordinary heat, it was more like a process of material disintegration. He concluded that the green light might represent the evolution of matter, while the red light represented disintegration. Curious, he tried combining the two to see what would happen. To his surprise, the meat grew significantly, and the soybean in his hand fused with the meat. The quality of the meat seemed extremely fresh, and it looked very good. he decided he would need to test that again. Unfortunately, the other experiments didn't go as well and most of them failed. Still, Hanfen said he had made great progress that day, and if he mastered his ability he would become the man at the top of the apocalypse. However, he then grew nervous, realizing that food wasn't the only thing he needed. He also needed weapons to protect himself. Rushing, he began cleaning and preparing his entire house before the temperature dropped. But by then, the apocalypse had already begun. While walking through the streets, he thought about how the temperature would fall to 45 within a week, and how urgently he needed a weapon. But since it was illegal to buy and sell weapons, and he didn't know anyone who could get him one, he felt stuck. That was when Hanfen saw a man trying to sell Chinese cigarettes. The sight triggered a memory. The man's name was Li Isweli, better known as Brother Li, who lived in the same neighborhood. Hanfen had heard that this man was influential in local projects, hiring people for various jobs. Though he didn't have a proper job himself, he was always busy trading and negotiating with different people. Hanfen thought he might be his way to get a weapon. So, Hanfen greeted Brother Li. Li asked if they knew each other, and Hanfen reminded him that they had met before when he was just a low-ranked kid. Brother Li apologized, saying he was always busy with projects and his memory wasn't great, then asked what Hanfen wanted. Hanfen leaned in and whispered his request, which startled Li, who asked why he needed something like that. Li insisted that they couldn't do anything illegal and that he couldn't simply hand out weapons, but Hanfen explained that he only wanted it for self-defense. He told a story about how one day, while riding his bike, a man had spit in his face. When he tried to argue, the man spit on him again. When Hanfen finally struck back, the man swore revenge. The next day, that same man showed up with several others and beat him badly. That was why he needed a weapon for self-defense. Brother Li said that was disgusting. How could someone spit on another person like that? He agreed to help Hanfen this time, and told him they needed to take a bus. If his own car hadn't been in for maintenance, he would have driven. But Hanfen said they could take his car, which surprised Li. Inside the car, Li complimented him, asking how much it cost. Hanfen replied that it was around 70 to 80,000. Li said it wasn't bad but still cheap and started bragging on his social media about being in a new car, pretending it was his own while Hanfen was right there beside him. Meanwhile, people on the streets were commenting about how strange the weather was. It felt like winter, yet it was still summer. Later, Li began negotiating with some people, even going as far as to claim that Hanfen's car was his own right in front of Hanfen's. Eventually, they went to meet the boss of that place. Li told the boss that Hanfen was his younger brother, and that Hanfen had asked for help buying a weapon. The boss said he thought it was something serious, but it turned out the boy only wanted to buy a gun. He then pulled out a pistol, saying it was 6,000. But Hanfen told Boss Li that he needed something longer, preferably with a scope. Shocked, the boss asked if he was trying to get a sniper rifle, and angrily reminded them that this wasn't a shopping mall. The only thing he had was the pistol. It was take it or leave it. At that moment, Li stepped in, saying there was a reason for this request, and everything began 5 years ago, with his wife. And just as he started, the boss cut him off in anger, saying it was disgusting. When he heard that none of the 3 children were Hanfen's, he felt like vomiting. Poor Hanfen thought that Ziwi was making up a very strange story. Boss Lab then said he would arrange a sniper rifle for him, but Hanfen would need to wait a few days. Hanfen thanked Boss Lab for this. Boss Lab also promised to give him a semi-automatic weapon with plenty of bullets and even handed over a pistol, saying it was a gift. Brother Li then mentioned that a colleague of his who worked for the government had leaked some news to him. Due to the abnormal climate, they were preparing to limit the purchase of supplies, so it was better for Hanfen to stock up as quickly as possible. Boss Lu nodded, saying he understood. Outside, Zivi commented that the boss had really liked Hanfen. When the boss was happy, he could even give away a cannon if he wanted to. Hanfen replied that he would buy some cigarettes later to give to the boss. Zivi told him there was no need, as they were just helping each other, but Hanfen insisted, asking what brand he preferred. Zivi said it had to be the OS brand because with other brands he coughed too much. 7 or 8 packs would be enough. Now that Hanfen had weapons and supplies, he felt prepared for the first stage of the apocalypse. The next step was to study his ability properly. If he could completely solve the food problem, his chances of survival in the apocalypse would increase greatly. At that moment, however, Hanfen was struck by something and fell to the ground. Zivi rushed to him, asking if he was all right. Hanfen said his foot seemed fractured and asked Zivi to take him to the hospital. Zivi admitted he didn't have a driver's license, but promised to help by calling a taxi to take him there. At the hospital, a nurse said it was snowing heavily. She then received a phone call saying they were short-staffed in the lobby, so the head nurse replied that she was on her way. Meanwhile, Hanfen was frustrated that he had suffered a fracture right before the apocalypse. The doctor informed him that he would need to stay under observation for at least an hour, after which he could collect his medicine. While waiting, Zibri said he was leaving but that Hanfen could call him later. After that, Hanfen noticed how, due to the sudden drop in temperature and the snowstorm, accidents had increased and the hospital was completely overcrowded. He wondered how long it would take before he could finally get his medicine. During this time, the head nurse, named Qin, was taking care of some patients. Hanfen was impressed that she had already become a head nurse at such a young age. Not only was she highly skilled, but she also had a great attitude toward her patients. On top of that, he thought she was very beautiful. Without realizing it, his gaze wandered somewhere it shouldn't, and he quickly grew embarrassed. Just then, an old man sitting nearby called for the head nurse. She went over and asked him what was wrong. The man said his back hurt a lot. What she didn't know was that he was secretly recording her under her clothes. Nurse Keen said they needed an X-ray to determine the cause, but the old man suddenly stood up, asking her to take a closer look. He then grabbed her by the waist, making her very uncomfortable. At that moment, Hanfen struck the old man, knocking him to the floor. He quickly apologized, saying it was his first time using crutches and they had slipped from his hands. Then, as he bent down to pick up the man's phone, the old man panicked, begging him not to touch it. The moment Hanfen saw the phone, he knew what it was. He asked how the old man dared to take such photos of the nurse. He warned him that if he was caught, he would be taken to the police. Hanfen declared he would not return the phone, which enraged the old man, who ran away. Nurse Qin was confused since the man had just complained about back pain. Hanfen wondered if there were really such naive people in the world. He then explained to her that she had been filmed by that man and handed her the phone, saying she could either erase it or call the police. Nurse Qin thanked him but asked if his foot was still injured. At that moment, Hanfen remembered his injury and collapsed to the floor, screaming. Nurse Keen helped him, saying that she was the one who should be grateful and that she wouldn't let criminals like that succeed in the future. But judging by the way she said it, it seemed like she hadn't fully learned her lesson. Soon after, someone called for the head nurse to assist elsewhere. Before leaving, she told Hanfen to remember to change his bandage a week later. Hanfen thought to himself that by then he probably wouldn't see her again. The scene shifted to the next day. The news reported that in the last 24 hours, temperatures had dropped drastically and seemed to be plummeting worldwide. Experts were saying that the abnormal cooling would not last long. At home, Hanfen thought to himself that unfortunately the authorities always hid the truth. He might have believed them if he had not died in his previous life, but this time he had managed to stock up on a full supply of goods in advance, reinforce his house, and prepare all the heating equipment. For now, survival was not a concern. Looking at his phone, he noticed that the neighbors in the community were starting to discuss the situation. A mysterious person, however, wrote something strange, claiming that the heavy snow was not caused by the climate but by the Earth's core and that an extremely cold apocalypse was coming. Hanfen wondered who this person was and how he could know so much about the end of the world. He decided he would need to keep an eye on him. Suddenly, the scene shifted to a depiction of several cute kittens representing people in the apocalypse. They were all complaining that it was snowing heavily and the temperature had already dropped below 20 bar. Some asked where the property management was, but the management explained that because of the snow, manpower was extremely limited. This sparked chaos, with people demanding a refund of their property fees. Hanfen thought their arguments were completely meaningless, since such snow could not be cleared by human effort alone. Meanwhile, a resident named Jian Shu stepped forward, asking everyone to calm down. He explained that even if they cleared the snow, it would only pile up again within hours. But if everyone worked together, they could clear it more quickly. He reminded them that property management staff were also people, powerless in the face of natural disasters. However, the crowd did not agree, asking angrily who he thought he was. Shu clarified that he was not helping the property management. He was simply stating the truth. He insisted that the problem could not be solved by arguing. When asked what they should do since they were all at risk of starving, Shu explained that driving to the supermarket was impossible. Even if the gates were cleared, who could guarantee the outside roads would be open? He suggested that everyone should walk together, offering to help clear the path himself. Hanfin had the impression he knew this man. From his past life, he remembered that Shu was always very active. Soon, another person added that those who wanted to go out should help clear the snow while those who didn't should stay quiet. Someone else offered to help too, saying he still needed to discuss a project worth tens of millions with a friend. Hanfin thought that he recognized that voice as well. Gradually, more people volunteered. One woman, though recovering from a cold, said she would also help if they were being led by Shu and Ho. Hanfin thought he recognized her voice too, but at that moment, several love-struck men shouted that Ryuna should not join in and should stay home to rest. Hanfin noted that Ryuna really was a skilled actress. At that moment, however, he received messages from her. She reminded him that he had promised to contact her but had disappeared. She said she was still waiting for him and even sent a photo saying she missed him dearly. He noticed that she was dressed lightly in an attempt to seduce him, always finding ways to make people fall in love with her. Yet at the same time she was kicking her phone angrily, cursing Hanfin and vowing he would pay for it. It was now the third day since the snow began, and the temperature had already dropped to 220 degrees. In the early stages of the apocalypse, there was still heating and internet access, so life continued in some ways. Hanfin spent his time browsing videos. Strangely, he mostly watched clips of women dancing, though he admitted he was already starting to feel bored. He thought that perhaps the hardest part of the apocalypse was enduring the loneliness. His bone injury would take months to fully heal, so he decided to keep distracting himself with videos. When he entered the science section, he began to wonder whether there were really people who could heal wounds. One case described a man who had jumped from the 15th floor. After the doctor stitched his wounds, it was discovered that his necrotic organs and bones actually began to regenerate. Hanfin questioned whether such a thing could really be true. That gave him an idea. He activated his power attempting to heal his leg, but the green light did not work miracles. Exhausted, he soon fell asleep on the sofa, drifting into one of the most bizarre dreams he had ever had. In the dream, he was dressed like a native warrior, riding goats on his way to paradise. Suddenly, he fell off one goat and injured his foot. Another goat appeared and began licking his foot. He pushed it away, but the goat wrapped its tongue around his injured foot. The goat started tossing him from side to side. At that moment he woke up terrified by the dream, wondering what the hell that was, but then he noticed that his foot was glowing with a green light and was completely healed. He began to wonder if that green light had automatically repaired his foot while he slept. To test it, he made a small cut on his finger with a knife. After using his power on the wound, he realized he was starting to understand. Meanwhile, outside, Shiryu thanked everyone for their hard work. An old man named Luo Guangguo commented that he hadn't done much at all, and said that everything had been possible thanks to the two brothers from the Jin family, Jin Taiyin and Jin Taiyu. At that moment, a girl suddenly collapsed and the brothers rushed to help her. Her name was Kion. They then agreed that the main road should be cleared first. Shiryu remarked that the snow was getting heavier and that they needed to hurry if they wanted to buy supplies later. Mr. Liu then said he had heard something. A resident of the community had been moving things every day, driving a small truck loaded with goods to his house. Shu replied that this could be something normal, perhaps just a move. But Mr. Liu explained that he had seen tanks of gasoline and a fireplace, which made it look more like the man was preparing for winter. At that point, Tun announced that the main entrance had already been cleared, but then a man named Yu Kanu appeared behind them, saying he found their conversation very interesting. Suddenly someone struck the back of his neck with a small ball. It was a woman named Len who scolded Canu, telling him to stop slacking off and come help her. The two immediately started quarreling as he accused her of just standing by and watching while he did all the work. Shuyu quickly stepped in and told them not to fight since the main entrance was already cleared. Wonkiel then asked Shuyu what he thought about the natural disaster. Shuyu, who had been very serious, suddenly softened his expression and replied that he didn't know either, but it seemed like just a temporary snowstorm that would soon pass. He added that even if the blizzard didn't stop, at least someone in the community had plenty of supplies. Wonkiel agreed, saying that he was right, as expected of someone with a sharp mind. Shuyu then asked everyone to line up properly and not push each other. The snow was getting heavier, so he urged them to return within 3 hours. Meanwhile, Hanfin was asleep when someone knocked on his door. When he opened it, it was Zui, who had delivered his orders. Hanfin thanked him for bringing them, but Zui asked if he had heard what happened at the Eastern District supermarket. That store had been completely emptied overnight. Hanfin realized it really had happened, but Zui explained that he was busy and quickly left. Hanfin then wondered how they had managed to clear out the entire supermarket in just one night without making any noise. He recalled from some novels he had read that there were people with powers who could absorb everything into their own space. He questioned whether someone with such a spatial ability might exist. Still, he knew he needed to study his own ability more carefully. So far, he had learned that it could interact with different food ingredients, but the success rate was very low. On average, only 1 in 10 attempts with soybeans succeeded, while the results with meat were even worse. Testing again, he found the failure rate was indeed extremely high and realized he needed a new method. By 10:45 p.m., he finally began to understand. Each type of food required a different energy value, and if it wasn't matched correctly, the process would fail. The pattern felt strangely familiar, almost like that popular rhythm dance game, Mescaline. If he assumed the energy values corresponded to up, down, left, and right, then the energy infused each second had to be precisely accurate. Ultimately, he realized he also needed to grasp the critical timing point. At last, he succeeded with a perfect result. Next, he tried the same method on meat. Unlike vegetables, the meat turned into a disgusting black liquid whenever he failed. But he reasoned that the principle must be similar. He simply had to figure out the correct energy required for meat. The process seemed to take longer than with vegetables. After countless failures, he admitted the difficulty had increased significantly. Still, after thousands of attempts, he finally succeeded. Nearly collapsing from exhaustion, he whispered that he had at last mastered the method. The scene then shifted to the news, which reported that the snowfall was worsening. The government had begun delivering supplies to affected areas and urged people not to leave their homes without special reasons. They also warned citizens to be careful, as electricity was being completely cut off in some regions. Hanfin muttered that it was happening again, just like in his past life. Picking up his phone, he saw that the group chat was starting. Some people believed the news, while others were more skeptical. Huang Guil asked if they really trusted those reports, since so far he hadn't seen a single truck delivering emergency supplies. Instead, he had heard from a friend that many armored vehicles and tanks were heading towards Sitia. That left only one possibility, that a war was about to break out. His words left the entire community in shock. Hanfin muttered that it seemed like he had heard the same thing in his past life. Shuryu said that was exactly right, and that they needed to take measures to save themselves. Some residents were already out of food, and with no clear estimate on when supplies would arrive, they had to organize ways to help those struggling. Shuryu suggested that people with stockpiles donate to those in need. He even announced that he would donate half of his own food and that anyone could come to his home at any time to collect it. Quan added that people should help each other as it was too cold to let anyone go hungry. He asked if Rina would donate something as well. She snapped back, asking if he was crazy, given how many people there were. He pressed her directly, and she accused him of saying that only because she had rejected him when he asked her out before. But to the community she apologized, saying she had very little food. Once again, many men rushed to defend her. Still, several people stepped forward to donate what they could, whether food or clothing. Shuryu thanked everyone who contributed and said they needed representatives to take responsibility. almost as if they were establishing their own emergency committee. Hanfen remembered this happening in his previous life and thought it was nothing more than a scheme to trick people out of their food and supplies. On July 19, the fifth day of the apocalypse, the outside temperature dropped to 40°C. The heating system also collapsed due to the extreme weather, and everyone was scrambling to find ways to stay warm. Just like before his rebirth, the situation was only going to get worse, except for him who was living like a king. At that moment, someone called one fan. It was the resident of apartment 1801, who was in charge of building 8. He said that in 20 minutes they would begin clearing the road, and after that, everyone should gather in the underground parking lot to check in. Hanfen grew nervous, not wanting to go outside, but the scene shifted to him entering the lobby on the first floor. He reminded himself not to burn bridges with his neighbors for now and that he had to minimize the risk of his secret being discovered. When he got there, he realized the snow had already blocked the first floor. Everyone was worried, since they had just cleared it yesterday, yet now it was completely buried again. They asked Hanfen to help open the door, and when they finally managed to push it open, the blizzard burst inside. The cold had worsened so much that people could barely keep their eyes open. Hanfen thought stepping outside in such weather would surely cause severe frostbite. People started saying that if they tried to clear the snow they would definitely die, but Swa stepped forward declaring that he would do it, mocking everyone as frightened kittens. One fan tried to stop him, telling him not to push himself too hard, but Swa, being reckless, charged straight into the snowstorm. His bravado didn't last long though, as he quickly had to be dragged back inside, his skin purple like an eggplant. They decided that everyone should retreat to the underground parking lot and figure out what to do once the snow stopped, since it was impossible to clear by human hands. Shu Yu told everyone they had no choice but to wait. And was it just me, or did anyone else notice that strange bracelet on his arm? But perhaps it was nothing. Shu Yu then announced that the underground parking lot would be designated as the location for donations and supply distribution. Hanfen wondered if that fraudulent committee had been set up by him. Meanwhile, Sakuryu thanked everyone for the large number of donated supplies, saying that the contributions would help many people in need. Residents commented that they would get through this disaster together, but Hanfen thought they should wait, because once the disaster didn't pass, everyone would regret it. At that moment Hanfen recognized someone. It was the nurse who had once taken care of him. As she was carrying several boxes, she tripped and nearly fell. Hanfen quickly caught her and asked if she was okay. She recognized him immediately, realizing he was her former patient. Surprised, she asked what he was doing there, standing and moving around when he had been injured. Ever since he was young, Hanfen had possessed incredible recovery abilities, and ordinary injuries would heal within just a few days. Because Keen was so innocent, she believed his excuse. He then asked if he could help her carry the boxes, but she told him it was fine since they were very heavy. One Fei insisted, saying he was strong and that it was the least he could do to thank her for bandaging his foot. Keen finally agreed, since he wouldn't give up. However, when One Fei lifted the box, he almost collapsed to the ground. It really was that heavy. Shocked, he asked, what on earth was inside? She explained that it contained medical supplies meant for donation. She also told Hanfen not to push himself too hard, since she was stronger than most men. Surprised, Hanfen asked if she had always been that strong. Kun replied that there was actually a reason behind it, but quickly changed the subject, saying it was something she couldn't explain on her own. Then she admitted she didn't even know his name. He introduced himself as Hanfen. She smiled and said her name was Keen Jeong, adding that it was a pleasure to meet him. Curious, she asked what he did for a living. Hanfen replied that he was unemployed. She was surprised, but he asked what was so shocking about being jobless. At that moment, a man accidentally bumped into Keen, pushing her against Hanfen. Embarrassed, he didn't know how to react. Just then, Riona appeared, asking why he hadn't told her he was outside. She clung to his arm and asked who his friend was. Keen quickly gathered her boxes, saying she didn't want to bother them anymore, and thanked Hanfen for his help before leaving. Hanfen turned to Ruina, asking what she was doing there. She explained that she came down to collect supplies and happened to run into him. Then she asked why he hadn't contacted her, since she had been very worried, trying to cover himself. He claimed he was just about to send her a message, but Ruina accused him of lying, saying she had just seen him laughing and chatting with that girl. She then asked if Hanfin happened to have extra food at home, since she was running out. Awkwardly, Hanfin replied that he didn't have much, but he could share a little. Still, he reminded himself that she hadn't answered his messages from a few days ago when he had asked if she wanted to spend some time with him. Flustered, Runa said she hadn't understood what he meant by that, but told him that if he wanted to talk he could always reach her online. Hearing this, Hanfin said that since she wouldn't agree he would just leave, but Rihanna quickly grabbed his arm, saying that he had changed a lot recently. She told him she took relationships very seriously and didn't want others thinking she was only with him for his money. Hanfin thought to himself that if he hadn't died in his previous life he might have believed her words, but now he wanted to tear off her mask. If only it weren't for the fact that he still needed to find out who had killed him in that past life. Then he realized he didn't need to search for that man. If he simply repeated the same steps as before, the man would eventually reveal himself. Hanfin then smiled and told Rihanna he was just joking, adding that he would be waiting for her answer and would bring her some food tomorrow. Rihanna called him the best and reminded him that if anything happened she would always be available online. As she walked away she flashed a sinister smile. Little did she know what Hanfin was planning. The scene shifted to Hanfin feasting on a massive meal, happily commenting on how delicious it was. His experiments over the last few days with his ability had led him to two discoveries. First, meat didn't grow indefinitely. Second, it could be recycled infinitely, just like soybeans. Previously, whenever he sprouted soybeans, he would use half of them to make bean sprouts and eat the other half. He applied the same principle to meat. Half a piece of meat, combined with a little soybean, could grow into a whole piece of meat. He tried the same process again with a new chunk of raw meat, and the result was identical. He repeated the experiment many times, confirming that he no longer needed to worry about food. Meanwhile, a news report stated that it was now August 2, the 19th day of the snowstorm. The reporters said they were in the Maldives, just 78 kilometers from the equator, where the average temperature had fallen to 42 rows C. The entire island had almost been swallowed by snow. The sea had completely frozen, with ice reaching a thickness of 55 centimeters. The disaster had already spread to countries near the equator, but Hanfin knew the reality was far worse than what the media reported. At that moment he heard the sound of an explosion. Looking out the window he realized it was the 7th explosion in recent days. "What the hell is happening out there?" he muttered. When he looked upward he saw several military helicopters flying by. He realized the outside situation was throwing the property owners into panic. At that very moment they were exchanging food supplies, though many owners were extorting others. People were fighting over money and there were many scuffles. The group announced that needy property owners would be invited to collect supplies for free. The scene shifted to Hanfin. He had only come down to gather some information, since before he was reborn there had been a massive conflict in that community. At that moment, however, it seemed they were genuinely distributing supplies, not committing fraud. Hanfin wondered what was really going on, but he knew he needed to find out. At that moment a man complained that he had delivered several huge boxes of supplies but was receiving very little food in return. Shuryu explained that the supplies were being distributed equally, but the man demanded that everything be returned immediately. Shuryu told him it couldn't be returned and hoped he would consider the bigger picture. He promised that once the disaster passed he would pay double. The man protested, saying he didn't know how long the storm would last and only wanted his supplies back. Others defended Shuryu, telling the man to take the food and leave as quickly as possible. Hanfin thought it was impossible for the man to reclaim his supplies in that situation. At that moment, Z reappeared and greeted Hanfin. Hanfin asked if he was okay since he hadn't seen him in a long time. Ziri explained that he was fine, just a little weak. He said that surviving the past few days on only water had been extremely difficult. He had donated most of his supplies to the committee thinking he was helping his neighbors, but now he had almost no food and the snowstorm was still ongoing. The committee had given him very little in return. Hornfin whispered to him, asking for a favor. Saburi immediately agreed, but only in exchange for 4 packs of noodles. Hornfin told him not to think it was too little, as he was running low on stock as well. Saburi began to cry, realizing that Honfin had made up an excuse to give him food for free. He promised he would never forget Honfin's kindness. Honfin told him to come to his house later to pick up supplies. Saburi thanked him and said he would come by. Honfin knew that after this, he wouldn't need to go out to gather information anymore. Although he felt a little bad for Saburi, nothing was more important than staying safely at home at that moment. Just then Ryuna appeared, slapping Honfin across the face. She said he had greatly disappointed her and asked why he hadn't been responding to her messages. Honfin couldn't believe she had slapped him since he hadn't even settled things with her yet. And now he had been slapped again. Ryuna continued asking if he was deaf, but Honfin tried to stay calm and apologized. He explained that his supplies had been stolen. He had placed them at the door and returned to get the key, only to find everything gone. Ryuna asked if he had any food left. Honfin replied that he didn't, since he only ate one meal a day and it wouldn't last much longer. She suggested that if he ate one meal every 2 days he could share half with her and together they could survive the disaster. Honfin couldn't believe what he was hearing. To Ryuna he was merely a tool. Yet he promised her that he would split whatever was left evenly and said he would message her at night after packing his things. She smiled and said she would wait for his message. The scene shifted again. Ryuna wondered why Honfin hadn't responded yet, and realized he couldn't abandon her again. The elevator in their building was also out of service, so she began climbing the stairs. She muttered that if it weren't for the supplies she would never have found him. She was exhausted, having starved for the past few days. As she neared Sashin's room, the lights went out, and a trash bag fell on her head. Finally, she reached Honfin's room, where he had fallen asleep and hadn't seen her messages. In the darkness he accidentally bumped into the railing and knocked things over. Ryuna, furious, called him a pig. Internally, Honfin thought he had prepared everything especially for her. He handed her a bag containing all the supplies he had left. When she opened it, the contents were completely moldy. He apologized, explaining that it was all that remained. She asked if they could really eat it. Honfin said that if she didn't want it, she could return it, but she took it back, saying she hadn't refused. Honfin wondered if this was the goddess he had been so infatuated with. Ryuna commented that while the surface was bad, the inside should still be good. She scraped it with a knife and began consuming the flour inside. She also got some in Honfin's hand. When she left, Honfin thought that trash would be enough to give her diarrhea for days, and she wouldn't be able to bathe because of the weather. While walking, Honfin noticed someone following him. He hid and surprised the person, saying they were dead. Then he realized it was a girl and asked why she was following him. He warned her that if she didn't answer he would undress her right there in the cold. Seeing that the girl wouldn't speak, he decided to let it slide this time, but warned her to stop playing these tricks. The girl grabbed him by the coat, and he told her to stop staring at him like that. She continued pulling him and pointing toward a place. He asked if she wanted him to follow her. When they arrived at her room, Honfin was impressed to see that she had stored a large amount of supplies. He realized she also knew about the snow disaster. She explained that she had done the calculations and the result was glacial. She had also mentioned it in the chat. Honfin then realized that this girl was actually the mysterious person, but he asked why she had led him there. She pointed to her television, which had multiple cameras, revealing that she had been monitoring everything Honfin had done. Shocked, he asked if she had been watching him all this time. While removing her clothes, she admitted that Honfin, embarrassed, asked why she was undressing, and she explained it was because it was very hot there. Later, Honfin realized she had suspected him because of his hoarding behavior and had started monitoring him to see if they could cooperate. Suddenly, the girl climbed over him and asked Honfin to teach her how to use the generator. After some time, he had taught her how to use it and asked if there was anything else. She pointed to another task. After helping her with several chores around her house, they finally paused to eat. Honfin felt like a full-time babysitter. Her self-care skills were poor, and she was so exhausted that she fell asleep while eating. Honfin felt like he was taking care of a child. Later, Honfin said goodbye to the girl and she handed him several boxes, calling them gifts. Honfin asked if she wanted something in return. She said she only wanted him to teach her how to use the generator again. After spending a few days with her, he realized she was completely useless in daily life. She also lacked common sense. She was determined to learn but never actually did. Hanfin looked at the food she had prepared and admitted it had improved slightly. He realized he hadn't even asked her name yet. She replied that her name was Master of the Evil Eye, which he ignored. Meanwhile, many people in the building were fighting over supplies. Shuyu activated his loudspeaker, saying he had had enough and asking if they thought it was right to fight over supplies at such a time. People challenged him, saying he had suggested donating the supplies in the first place. Shuyu asked them to be patient, explaining that the donated food was insufficient and that people didn't deserve to starve. He reminded everyone that a loaf of bread that originally cost a few coins was being sold for hundreds, and a piece of bread was auctioned in 10th portions. People were making a fortune from the disaster. The chaos over supplies was ridiculous to him. In the end, all of them would starve in that place. He said the most important thing was for them to unite and reclaim the supplies that belonged to them. People agreed, realizing it was unfair to let others benefit while they starved. Shuyu reminded everyone that this situation was their own fault. Everyone became determined to retrieve the food. Ziwi, alarmed, quickly messaged Hanfin, saying the people had gone mad and would steal supplies. Shuyu was encouraging people to take supplies from others. They were breaking into every house and asking Hanfin not to confront them as everyone was armed. Hanfin quickly locked his door and closed his window, thinking he hadn't expected things to escalate like this. Although he had 2 guns, this was an organized action and he might not be able to handle everyone. He also couldn't expose his supplies. He quickly started rearranging his room to hide everything, but suddenly, the entire room went dark, leaving everyone panicked. The building's power had gone out. Hanfin thought that due to the snowstorm, the heating system was consuming more energy, so the power would fail sooner or later. Furthermore, the extremely low temperature made equipment repair impossible. Therefore, the power outage and internet disruption could become permanent. Once the residents realized that calls would no longer go through, panic could escalate into much more serious chaos. Half an hour earlier, Runa was eating instant noodles, and a man with her said he had offered to buy all the supplies at 50 times the market price to shut up those poor bastards in the group. He had spent a little over 500,000 on those supplies and even managed to auction some of them off, while all those poor people were struggling to buy from him. He made a significant profit, and he thought that with those supplies the woman was completely under his control. Suddenly, he heard voices at his door and wondered what was happening at this hour. When he listened, he realized people were trying to break in. Several armed individuals began invading his house. Meanwhile, Hanfin was preparing a trap for anyone attempting to enter. At that moment, the strange girl arrived, asking for his help. Just as he was about to open the door, he remembered what had happened in his previous life and told her that people were stealing supplies, so he wouldn't open it. The girl sat in front of the door, but Hanfin told her to run, warning that the others might catch her. She could hear people approaching. Just as the men appeared, she was gone because Hanfin had quickly grabbed her to prevent her from getting hurt. After that, the men started banging on Hanfin's door. He reassured the girl not to be afraid because the door was heavily reinforced. The men, realizing it was too strong, tried to break down the neighboring door instead. Hanfin thought it was fortunate that he had reinforced his door first. He then released the girl, embarrassed, asking if she was okay. The girl shyly thanked him. Hanfin told her that once he activated the device, anyone touching the door would be electrocuted. He added that even if he explained, she wouldn't understand. The girl then explained that the anti-theft system relied on the electric current and voltage difference, which startled Hanfin. He asked how she knew that. She explained it was simple. After a power outage, wrap the exposed wire around the doorknob and connect the ground wire to the distribution box. Finally, press the switch. After doing this, Hanfin confirmed it worked and asked again how she knew it. She said that the evil eye had the ability to see the truth of the world. Hanfin ignored her again, saying if she needed his help she should ask. As he was busy, she then announced that she would be living with him from now on. Hanfin asked if she was joking, even tripping and falling. When he fell, his hand turned purple, and he felt something very soft. He wondered what the purple light on his hand was. Looking at his toolbox, everything seemed strange. Even his hammer felt limp. He was startled, realizing someone else was in his house and had seen his ability. The girl explained that he was also a messenger chosen by the master of the evil eye. Hanfin tried to disguise it, claiming he was a hidden subordinate. Strange phenomena occurred frequently, and he thought the girl's thought process was so bizarre that he might be able to fool her. The girl said that since they were messengers, they needed to support each other. Their room would be shared. Before he could react, she had already invaded his room. Hanfin still wanted to understand the purple light. It seemed he didn't just have two lights, the others had not yet been discovered. The purple light appeared when he had tripped over the wire. He tried to recall the sensation. The purple light reappeared on his hand. He tested it on other objects. When he touched the machete, it became soft. Trying it on various items, they all became soft. And the longer he used the purple light, the softer they became. He thought the effect was useless, but wondered if combining the green and purple lights would restore the machete. He realized that merging the lights could change the material's hardness. However, the hardness seemed slightly exaggerated, prompting him to consider something else. Meanwhile, some men were debating whether to return the supplies they had stolen, but another insisted they would not. Since he didn't even have enough for himself, they needed to keep it a secret. However, suddenly they noticed that the wall looked very strange, as if it were twisting. At that moment, a terrifying face appeared on the wall, which horrified the men and made them run away. Meanwhile, Hanfin thought that building an entire wall was a lot of work, but it seemed his efforts were paying off. He said it was time to test the wall's reinforcement. When he struck the wall with a hammer, absolutely nothing happened, and he thought it was truly insane. Meanwhile, one of the men argued that the residents had no food, so he had only collected the supplies. At that moment, Tawan appeared, immobilized the man, and asked where he had hidden the food he stole, as he had clearly seen him take 3 bags but only deliver 1. The man insisted he must be mistaken, swearing he had delivered everything. When Tawan tried to hit the man, Shuyu intervened, saying he wanted to talk first. Tawan told the man he had been lucky this time. Shuyu extended his hand and asked if the man was okay. The man then revealed he had hidden the food because his family had 5 members. Shuyu handed him his portion of the food, saying that rules were rules, but he was moved by the man's story and gave his share to him. The man began crying and thanked Shuyu, saying that if he ever needed anything in the future, he only had to ask. Shuyu then told everyone else to return home to collect supplies. Taiwan asked how he had managed to get the man to hand over the food. Shuyu replied that he had merely tried to understand the principle behind it. Throughout the history of Countryum, there had been countless riots and conflicts due to class struggles, but these were defined as collective social behavior. As long as participants were not caught in the act, they would not be prosecuted. Shuyu only told the man that if he broke the rules, the community would not accept him. He would be seen as a thief and could face retaliation from those he had robbed. Wanguryul added that in these groups of unrest, there was usually a leader behind everything, and chaos often created heroes. That young man was not so simple. Returning to Hanfin, he had successfully reinforced his entire house, but heard a noise and wondered if a neighbor was trying to steal supplies. When he checked, it was Rionar, saying she thought she couldn't disappoint his feelings and that hardships revealed true love. Hanfin was startled, as these were the exact words she had said on the day she killed him. This meant that in addition to her, the man from outside was also present. He ran quickly to grab his weapon, thinking that this day had finally come, but realized the power was out, putting him at a disadvantage. If he couldn't kill them with a single blow, he could be counterattacked. Using his electric trap would require tricking them to grab the handle simultaneously, which was impossible. He was also unsure of the trap's effectiveness. He needed to assess the situation first. His greatest threat was not Rionar but the man hiding in the shadows. He needed to locate him for a fatal strike. How could he know the man's position before leaving the apartment? Then he remembered the man had hidden in a blind spot behind the door. He must be right behind that wall. Activating his purple ability, Hanfin thought it might work. Meanwhile, the man asked Rionar if Hanfin was worth all this effort. She replied that he still had some supplies left. She remembered he had bought a truckload of goods on the day of the disaster, enough to last them several days. However, Hanfin struck the man through the wall, leaving Rionar completely confused. Ranfin then opened the door and used a fire extinguisher on Ryunar. When she looked down, her friend was completely defeated. Hanfin tried to restrain her, but she ran away quickly. As the other man attempted to escape, Hanfin kicked him down, telling him not to get up. The man pleaded, asking if Hanfin knew who his father was, but Hanfin continued hitting him, saying he didn't care. The man said he held no grudge against Hanfin, but Hanfin kept striking, demanding to know why he had tried to kill him. When the man began to explain, Hanfin refused to listen. Using a spiked baseball bat, he killed the man. When he returned to reality, he began vomiting. Looking back, he realized the girl had seen everything. She asked if he needed help. Suddenly the scene changed, and they returned inside. In the apartment, he thought that the girl was not afraid of that terrifying scene, and he was starting to feel scared of her. He then told her that those guys might come back for revenge, so it would be better for her to leave, but the girl said she would stay there with him. Hyunfin kept insisting that it was too dangerous and that both of them could die. However, she told him not to worry since the master of the evil eye would help them, and then explained that the evil eye's energy had run out. She was about to enter a suspended state, but Hanfin grabbed her by the arm, saying he didn't want those strange answers. She asked Ranfin to go into the room, and when he looked inside, he was so shocked that his face looked like Saitama's before losing his hair. Meanwhile, people were lining up to get supplies, and Ruina was thinking that the man had not come back all night. She also wondered how Hanfin had set up that trap in advance. But the only thing that mattered was that when Hanfin opened the door, there was a faint light and warmth inside, which meant he had something to generate electricity. It seemed he had prepared for the snow disaster, and it was also possible that he had many supplies hidden in his apartment. She was furious, convinced that he had good food but gave her garbage instead. She decided she needed to find out what was inside that bastard's house. At that moment, she bumped into a man who recognized her and told her that a bonfire had been lit in the hall of Building 5, but she replied that everything was fine and that she just wanted to go home. The man grabbed her arm, saying there was plenty of food and asking her to stay at his place for a few days. He admitted that he always liked her type of woman, but she pulled her arm away, telling him she didn't like trash. The man demanded that she stop pretending, saying she was secretly hoarding supplies and that everyone had already seen what she was doing. At that moment, other men overheard and accused her of being responsible. She slapped him across the face, telling him to let her go. Just as the man was about to hit her back, he was struck by a powerful slap that sent his body flying far away. Everyone was shocked, wondering how he was thrown like that. The one who had slapped him was Kin Yun. She asked Riona if she was all right, if she was hurt. Terrified, Riona said she was fine. Then Kin handed her a card, telling her that if she ever felt unwell, she could look for her. But the man grabbed Kim, demanding to know how she dared to do that to him. As he was about to strike her, Zrui stopped him and threw him to the ground, saying he hated men who hit women. However, the other men began accusing Ruina, saying she had been fraudulently hoarding supplies and was with the rich man who had been manipulating prices earlier. Shuyu then grabbed the man and asked who he thought he was, reminding him that their duty was to ensure everyone had food. The man apologized, and Shuyu told him that next time he should just leave. He also apologized to Ruina for frightening her and asked Zrui if he would consider joining their group, but Zrui refused, saying he wasn't interested in joining a team that robbed people and that he would rather starve. Ken also said she couldn't accept that method, but she would be willing to help if there were injured patients. Rowena, however, asked Shuyu if she could join him, admitting that she had secretly admired him for a long time and wanted to spend time with him, but Shuyu told her she was mistaken, since one of them could fight and the other could heal. So what exactly could she do? He told her she had no value to be recruited by them. Left with no choice, Rowena revealed that she knew where supplies were hidden, which greatly surprised the man. Back at Hanfin's apartment, the girl was taking several objects out of a subspace. Hanfin was stressed when she pulled a mannequin from her space. It was definitely not what he wanted. To sum it up, the girl had the ability to store items in her space. She could harbor a black hole in her chest and absorb everything she saw. Hanfin warned her that if she didn't find the right item soon, his house would be overflowing. He also said that putting things in was easy, but taking them out was difficult, and her accuracy in retrieving items was very low. He asked why it was so hard for her to find things in her black hole, which honestly didn't sound too good. But anyway, the girl explained that she hadn't fully explored it yet, as her space was vast. Hanfin then asked if he could stick his head inside her black hole to see. She said he could, and when he put his head inside, he was utterly shocked. Since it was enormous, it was expected from a skill user who had completely emptied the market during the night, but it was like finding a needle in a haystack. At that moment he ran out of air, pulled his head back, and started yelling at her, asking why she hadn't warned him there was no oxygen inside. His skin looked like it was about to burst. But just then the girl said she had found what he wanted. Hanfin was impressed, wondering if that really existed, but then several other things fell out, and he asked what the hell all that was. Meanwhile, some men were saying something was wrong with the 18th floor. They were afraid to go up there, not wanting to encounter that monster again, but one of them said that Mr. Shiryu had trusted them, so they couldn't let him down. Hanfin, watching everything through his setup, said that it was time to start Plan B and that the timing had to be perfect. As the men went upstairs, they heard noises. Suddenly, several carts rolled toward them carrying bombs, red smoke bombs. Immediately afterward, a drone appeared, dropping more bombs on the men. However, one of them managed to hit the drone. The girl said it was out of control and she couldn't stabilize it anymore. After a shower of fireworks, she managed to make it work again. Hanfin told her to find a place to land as quickly as possible. She said it had landed successfully outside the window of a certain floor. Hanfin said he would retrieve it right away since the drone was very important to them. But then the girl mentioned there was a body on the stairs. When he went to check, he realized it was Ziri. He wondered why Ziri was there and questioned whether he might have stolen from someone. Hanfin told the girl that he had the key and was leaving, but asked her not to open the door for anyone. She handed him a radio, asking him to keep the communication open. Hanfin thanked her, picked up a gun and said he didn't intend to use it. The scene shifted to Hanfin descending the stairs while staying in contact with the girl. Based on the drone's readings, he said the outside temperature was 49.8 row C, and without protection humans would freeze to death in less than 30 minutes. He feared Ziwi's condition could be very bad. Meanwhile, the scene switched to Su Yu managing the supplies. Ruina asked if she could join them now, but Chu Yu said of course not, since they couldn't confirm if this was the work of her friend. If it weren't for Guanhao speaking up, he never would have believed her words. He added that whether her information was true or false, he expected her to prove her value during the operation. Picking up a gun, Ruina said she understood his point. Chuyu then told everyone to stay alert and follow him. As they climbed the stairs, they found Ziwi unconscious. When they gave him some water, he shouted that it was too hot. Realizing who had saved him, he cursed his bad luck. Taewon asked what his problem was, since he had just been rescued but was still complaining. Ziwi replied that he would never thank people who robbed others. Taewon called him an idiot. But Suryu stopped him. Shuryu said he would invite Ziwi once again to join them, because only by working as a team could they survive the disaster. But Ziwi refused, saying he would never join them. Sakuryu told him he was misunderstanding, that the reason he wanted Ziwi to join was because of his strength, so that he could help weaker people have hope of surviving. Ziwi replied that he knew exactly what Ziwi was doing, since he gave those poor old people food only once every 3 days, which was the same as waiting for death. Since he had no father, those methods would not work on him. Hanfen, overhearing the conversation, realized that Shuryu truly didn't care about anyone there. If things continued like this, the committee would end up in conflict. Taiwan, getting frustrated, asked Sivi directly if he would join the team or not. If not, he should get out of the way, but Sivi headbutted him, and everyone else was ready to attack him. Sivi declared he wasn't afraid of them. Hanfen thought this was very bad. Sivi looked like he could collapse at any moment, and with so many people against him he wouldn't stand a chance. Still, Hanfen couldn't abandon Ziwi, since he had helped him many times before. He grabbed his gun, thought for a moment, and then fired a shot that nearly hit Taiwan, warning everyone that if anyone moved, he would kill them. Ruia was shocked, wondering how he dared to leave his room with a gun, but Hanfen quickly handed Ziwi the key to his room, telling him to get there as fast as possible and asking that the He ordered everyone to drop their weapons, and they all ended up obeying Hanfen. He warned that if anyone moved, he would shoot without thinking twice, and so the two of them managed to escape. Shuyu then asked if anyone there knew that man. Rowena replied that his name was Hanfen, and said they were heading to his home. Taiwan demanded to know why she hadn't mentioned that he had a gun. Rowena explained that it was also the first time she had seen it. Shuyu said he believed her and added that if Hanfen really had an important weapon, then he certainly had many supplies, and perhaps he was the one manipulating the prices. Shuyu also suspected that the person Guankul had seen was actually Hanfen. Taewon asked if they were really going to continue with this since Hanfen could shoot them, but Shuyu argued that if Hanfen had wanted to kill someone, he would have already done it. He didn't believe Hanfen could stay hidden forever, so they needed to return and prepare security measures before coming back. He insisted that they had to take down 180 and 4 as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Hanfen and Zivi were returning to the apartment. When Zivi opened the door, he noticed that it was very warm inside. Entering, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. There were heaters and even a power generator. After seeing all the supplies, he asked how Hanfen had managed it. Just then the girl appeared and asked where the drone was. Embarrassed, Hanfen admitted that he had forgotten it. The scene then shifted to 2 hours later. Zivi said that Hanfen was truly incredible for having predicted the snowstorm. Ruffy apologized for not being honest from the start, but Zivi stood up and bowed to Hanfen, thanking him because without him he surely would have starved to death. Hanfen told him not to say that, since Zivi had helped him many times as well. Zivi then started crying, saying Hanfen was a very good person. Zivi went on to explain that things had changed a lot. He asked Hanfen if he remembered the message he had sent about the power outage. From that day on, Shuyu had tried to steal supplies from others. Some people obeyed him while others like Zivi did not. After some people left, Shuyu acted as if he didn't care but secretly ordered Tao to reduce threats, meaning to deal with those who opposed him. Hanfen remarked that it was no wonder the owners' committee had grown so quickly. They were using dirty methods, and admitted that dealing with Shu would be very difficult. Zivi then said there was a saying, "What goes around comes around." He asked Hanfen to guess who they had messed with. It was none other than Lin Din-ju, the middleweight boxing champion. Hanfen said that surely everyone must have been beaten badly. Zivi confirmed this, explaining that Shu Yu cared too much about his reputation, so he never admitted defeat. Those who were targeted by Young Shu Yu kept trying to fight against Young Hu, but in the end they were all defeated by him. Because of this, Young Hu gained many followers, including 2 who were very well known. One of them was Zhen Hu, a former fan of Young Hu who was famous for his speed after years of underground fighting. The other was King Yongjian, naturally gifted with tremendous strength and a body as tough as a monster's. Alongside Yonghu, the 3 of them became a powerful force inside the complex. They despised the hypocrisy of Jian Shuyu, but Zhuyu kept trying to steal their supplies. Zivi explained that just before he fainted, all of them had been on their way to rob Hanfen. Hanfen realized that things were not going well. Suddenly they heard a noise looking at the cameras. The girl said that someone was coming after them. Hanfen quickly stood up saying he would electrify the door, but the girl said she smelled sulfur. At that moment an explosion went off, knocking them all down. The girl said they were probably using explosives, and very powerful ones. Checking the camera, Hanfen saw Ryuna talking to Shuyu, which meant she had likely betrayed him. Hanfen told everyone to stay away from the door and he electrocuted the person touching it. Then Shuyu ordered crystals of explosives to be placed at the junction between the door and the wall. When they detonated them, the door remained intact, with only a few cracks on the wall. Shuyu concluded that the boy must have taken precautions. He then ordered the use of a combination of 3 explosives aimed at a specific spot. If there was no reaction, they were to keep increasing the explosives, because today they had to invade his home. They kept trying to blow up Hanfen's door. Hanfen noticed that the explosions were getting louder and louder, but then he heard a different sound. Zibwei said it seemed like the wall was cracking. They began moving furniture in front of the wall to block it, but Hanfin told them it would be useless and urged them to hurry since he already had a plan. The girl insisted on handling it, saying she could move everything quickly. She then sucked everything into her gluttonous black hole, which terrified Zivwe. Meanwhile, Hanfin activated his purple power, saying he would try to remodel the wall like last time, but he needed to control the range or else the hardening process would take too long. Using it together with the green light, he finally managed to repair the door. Zivi asked if Hanfin had magical powers, but before he could answer, another explosion went off. The wall cracked again. Hanfin wondered how they managed to break it after reinforcement, but the girl explained that they were bombing the floor. Hanfin realized that no matter how much he repaired, it would be useless. He then said he had a very dangerous idea and asked if they trusted him. They all replied that Hanfin could say whatever he wanted and they would follow. Right after that, the attackers finally managed to blow up Hanfin's apartment door. Taewen ordered everyone to be careful and search every corner for supplies, but when they entered, the apartment was completely dark. The men complained that there was no one in the room and no supplies either. In the kitchen, they found only a bit of trash and a box of seeds. They started cursing Rihanna, calling her a damn liar, but she insisted she wasn't lying and suggested that maybe they were hiding in the room. When they went to open the door, Zivri kicked it onto one of the men and Hanfin started shooting at everyone. However, they had military shields. Hanfin told everyone to leave, but Shiri accused him of hoarding supplies and ignoring the collective good, saying that because of him many people had starved to death and they were there to deliver justice. Hanfin thought the man wasn't just morally blackmailing them. At that point it was useless to argue. The people looked like a pack of wolves with red eyes. Hanfin asked what the hell they were doing there since there were no supplies in his house. The men insisted he must be hiding them. Rowena said that last time his room had heating and lights. At that moment, Hanfin fired a shot in Rowena's direction, shouting that she was a damn lying bitch. He blamed her for tricking him into trading supplies which had put him in that situation. Taewen became furious with Rowena, accusing her of really lying, but Shuyo said there was a simple solution. They needed to check Hanfin's room first. He asked if Hanfin would refuse. After searching, a man reported that there was absolutely nothing inside, only trash and a little girl. The girl ran toward Hanfin saying she was very scared and hungry. The other men then realized they had been deceived. Shuyu demanded an explanation from Rowena immediately. Rowena swore she hadn't lied, claiming she had seen everything with her own eyes. She wondered how Hanfin could have pulled it off. At that moment she grabbed a flashlight and shone it in Hanfin's eyes. When he tried to cover them, she somehow managed to snatch his gun. But seriously, the narrator sneered. What a useless protagonist. The girl was so far away and he still lost his gun. With the weapon in her hands, Rina demanded he tell the truth. Hanfin said the truth was that she had deceived everyone for the sake of supplies. Rina declared she would kill him, but the others stopped her. The one who took the gun back was none other than Chiyu. Then Taewen, holding a piece of iron, said he would kill that damn woman, but Chiyu stopped him, saying the committee was not a place for violence and executions. Shuyu apologized to Hanfin, returned his weapon and invited him to join the committee, adding that he didn't have to answer right away and could think it over. He promised to wait for his response the next day when they went to collect supplies. After that they all left. The scene shifted. They modified their apartment again, and Zivri was surprised to discover that the girl had a home directly above his. Hanfin said it was even bigger than his own. Thanks to her they had been able to pull off that act. Hanfin explained that first they had to arrange the whole place, but they needed to leave behind some trash and empty packages. He then told Zivri to open the window to cool the room quickly, so it would look like the place had been without food for a long time. Hanfin concluded that since Zivri had made such a loud scene when he came back empty-handed, it would stir up outrage. In public, people would point fingers at the weakest ones, but since Hanfin had a gun, Rina would become their scapegoat. Sivi said they had too many people and asked if Hanfin could really stay safe even with a weapon, especially since someone had already managed to take it away from him. Hanfin replied that this was the worst-case scenario, but he was certain that if Shivi got hold of the gun he would try to resolve things peacefully. Sivi then asked what would happen if Shuvi shot him. Hanfin explained that there had originally been only one bullet in the gun and he had already fired it once before. Sivi was impressed, realizing Hanfin had intentionally allowed his gun to be taken. Hanfin admitted that it was more or less part of his plan, proving once again just how cunning he was. Hanfin then explained that their next plan was to pretend they were going through a very difficult time while quietly making a fortune, since their real mission was to bring down the committee. The scene shifted to the distribution of supplies. Hanfin and Ziri observed everything people were saying. Ziri explained that according to his investigation, the first 4 floors had been emptied. The 5th and 6th floors housed logistics and families, but he couldn't reach the 7th or 8th floors. He suspected the warehouse was probably up there and added that guards were stationed above the 5th floor. Ziri said he would go up first to distract them, giving Hanfin a chance to knock them out with a stick. However, as they climbed, they noticed there was no one around. Hanfin suggested that maybe the guards had gone to eat, but Ziri warned him not to let his guard down. When they reached the 7th floor, they were shocked to find no one there at all. Not even a single soul. No guards was one thing, but complete emptiness was another. They decided to split up, agreeing to shout if they found anything. Hanfin thought about it. With so many people in the committee, they couldn't possibly defeat them all head-on. They would have to destroy it from the inside. In his view, the committee was nothing more than an organization held together by the Union of Supplies. As long as they could find the warehouse and let the evil king empty it, the committee would collapse quickly. But while it sounded simple, the real problem was figuring out where the supplies were actually stored. Just then, Ziri came running, calling out for Hanfin. Hanfin could hardly believe it. Ziri had really found something. When he went to check, it was a door labeled supplies. Hanfin wondered if it might be a trap. Even the key was already inserted, positioned with suspicious precision. Ziri suggested maybe they had forgotten it, but said the only way to know for sure was to try. Hanfin pointed out that a thin wire was wrapped around the key's handle. Without a doubt, it was a trap. He remembered 2 people mentioning the need to check the warehouse door, and now he understood they had been talking about this. Hanfin told Ziri not to touch anything yet, since they first needed to figure out exactly what they were dealing with. Now that they had located the warehouse, they could decide how to open the door later. But just then, 2 men opened the door, forcing them to run. The men quickly caught up, and a fight broke out. After delivering kicks to their attackers, Hanfin and Ziri managed to lock the door with an iron bar. But soon they heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Their only option was to go higher. When they reached the 8th floor, Hanfin realized his arm was broken. He had shielded Ziri from a blow and taken the damage himself. At that moment, a man suddenly emerged from the shadows, dragging Hanfin into a room and locking the door behind them. The man demanded to know what the hell Hanfin was doing there. Hanfin answered that they were there to collect supplies, but the man stepped on his broken arm, accusing him of lying. He said there was no way Hanfin had just stumbled up there, since he had intentionally avoided the 5th and 6th floors. That meant he must know something about the committee. Hanfin asked if the man had been following them, but the stranger sneered, asking if Hanfin really thought there weren't guards around. Looking around, Hanfin noticed several people already defeated. Meanwhile, others were searching for Ziri. Suddenly the man opened the window, preparing to jump. Hanfin shouted, asking what the hell he was doing. It was the 8th floor, but the man explained that in truth it was only the 4th floor, since snow had piled up high, covering the 3rd and 4th floors completely. Using the snow to cushion the fall was nothing, he said, and urged Hanfin to jump quickly if he didn't want to be killed. With no other option, Hanfin jumped too. Before hitting the ground, he activated his purple power to soften the landing. From above, the men shouted that they were still alive. The mysterious man then drove his elbow into a nearby window, smashing it open so they could get inside. Hanfin ended up following the man. The scene shifted, and they were sitting safely in front of a fire. Hanfin thought that the bearded man was very sharp. If it weren't for him, he surely would have been discovered. The man asked if Hanfin was scared, then said that the one sitting there was nothing more than a dead man. Hanfin asked why he had helped him, but the man replied that he hadn't helped him at all, since he would rather kill him right there. However, because Hanfen hadn't been caught by the seventh floor trap, it meant he had some brains. The man demanded Hanfen tell him everything he knew about the committee. Of course, Hanfen could choose not to say anything, but if he did, he would simply become the man's next meat shield. Judging from the guards Hanfen had managed to knock out, the man guessed he was there either to steal supplies or because he bore a grudge against the committee. Hanfen asked if he also had a grudge against them, and the man answered, "Of course I do. If it weren't for Sheyu hiding his secret, none of this would have happened." Startled, Hanfen asked what secret he meant. The man stood up, saying it seemed Hanfen knew Sheyu, and that there was clearly bad blood between them. He demanded Hanfen tell him everything he knew about the committee, or else he would be killed. So Hanfen said that Sheyu had brought explosives to his house, stolen his wife and his supplies, and to get revenge, he had brought out all of his hidden trump cards, but against all of them, a pistol was useless. Hanfen thought to himself that he was mixing truth with lies. Since he really did have a pistol, that made his story sound more believable. The man scoffed, saying a broken pistol meant nothing to the committee. He hadn't even taken the weapon from Hanfen, he had spared his life, proving it was useless. Hanfen asked why he didn't just accept that, and the man explained that it was just a performance to maintain his leadership. He then asked if Hanfen had brought his friends to help defeat Xu Yu. Hanfen replied that yes, because without Xu Yu the committee would be much weaker. He admitted that the committee's original intentions had been good. It had genuinely helped some people survive, but thanks to Xuyu's ideology, everyone now believed that the more ruthless you were, the more comfortably you could live. And even if the apocalypse ended, those who had lost their conscience would never again integrate into society. That was why they had to bring down the committee. The man asked what the point of that was. In this world, survival was all that mattered. He hated Xiyu. Yes, but Hanfen's ideology was just as ridiculous, because that community would eventually collapse into robbery and massacres anyway. Hanfen then asked what would happen to the community if they simply left it alone. The man said in that case they should ask for a third opinion. He opened a door, revealing someone hiding inside. The person immediately tried to attack him, but he dodged. When he struck back, the attacker blocked with both hands. Just as he was about to hit again, Hanfen stopped him, saying to wait because the attacker was actually Nurse Kim. She was shocked to see Hanfen there. The scene shifted. Kim was tending to Hanfen's injured arm, bandaging the wound. She explained that she had taken supplies from Grandpa Lee to do a checkup, but when she entered his place she discovered that he had died. Then she heard someone trying to break in, and in fear she hid in the room. The man accused her of being responsible for the old man's death. Kim admitted that he was right, but said she didn't regret it. Even if it seemed cruel or heartless, if she didn't survive she couldn't save anyone else. Hanfen asked if Xu Yu had allowed her to enter and leave freely. She answered yes. He had given her a free pass, along with plenty of supplies. How could she possibly refuse? She explained that in recent days, Shachiyu had been expelling many sick and elderly people, and Grandpa Lee had been one of them. By the time she found out, it was already too late. He was gone. The man muttered that with fewer mouths to feed, the committee could last longer. Hanfen then told her that Ziwi had mentioned a new force had appeared within the community, one that was completely against the committee. Most likely, Xiyu was anxious to eliminate them. That was why he abandoned the weak and elderly, diverting supplies to the young and strong. And judging by how they were using bombs, it was possible he was preparing for war against this new force. If that was true, Hanfen said, he had to find those weapons. The man scoffed, asking what Hanfen could possibly do even if he found them. Hanfen replied that if he located the arsenal, he might discover something useful. The man said if Hanfen wanted to go ahead and die, he was free to do so. In this apocalypse, Xu Yu's committee was just one small faction. There would be more battles for survival in the future. In this world, the last survivor would be the true victor. With that, he left, abandoning them there. Kim asked if she could help Hanfen somehow, but he said he didn't need anything. He didn't want to drag her into this mess. Kim insisted that he shouldn't say such a thing. Sakurio stole his supplies and even his wife. She grew angry just hearing about it, but seeing that there was no other way, Hanfen told her he had something to ask of her. Meanwhile, some men were wondering if it was really Hanfen. Another replied that it definitely was. At that moment, Hanfen appeared in front of everyone, but he was quickly captured and tied to the ground. Taiyan began kicking him, asking why he dared to do this, since Mr. Ryu had spared his life, and yet here he was trying to steal supplies. But then another man said that Mr. Ryu wanted them to gather upstairs, and so the two men left, leaving Hanfen behind. Using the green light, Hanfen managed to recover his body and said that once he healed, he would find the arsenal. Then using the purple light to free himself, he confirmed that the fracture had healed, but the healing consumed so much energy that he nearly fainted. Just then some men appeared again, and Hanfen disguised himself once more. To his shock, he realized they had captured Ziwi. To wake him up, Hanfen slapped Ziwi across the face. Ziwi complained about the slap, asking him next time to hit somewhere that wasn't already swollen, since he could no longer feel the left side of his face. Hanfen then asked him to explain what exactly had happened on the other side. Ziwi said that after being dragged through the corridor door was about to be broken down, so he managed to remove the lock from the electrical room's door and hide inside. Inside there was a large hole that seemed to lead deeper down. Thinking the men would eventually open the electrical box, he slid down the wires, believing they would take him to the basement parking lot. Instead, he ended up on the second basement level. Although there was no one there, the place was stacked with tons of sealed boxes. When he opened one, he discovered it was full of sausages, each as thick as his forearm. But just as he was examining one, he heard a sound behind him and was knocked unconscious. He only woke up now, thanks to Hanfen. Zivi added that now he understood why the committee was so arrogant. They had plenty of food. But Hanfen wondered, if they had so much food, why were they still stealing supplies from homes? Ziwi admitted he had never seen sausages that big before. Hanfen said he had a bad feeling about this, wondering if it could be Ziwi's secret storage. At that moment they overheard some men talking, asking why Ziwi suddenly wanted Ziwi dead. This terrified both Hanfen and Ziwi. When the men entered, Hanfen and Ziwi were waiting behind the door and quickly captured and tied them up. Hanfen concluded that Ziwi definitely had murderous intentions. Ziwi then asked what they should do if those supplies were really so important, since there were dozens of boxes. Hanfen told him not to worry because he had a plan. First, they needed to meet Shi Wang. He called her and asked if the woman had already gone to fetch her. Shi Wang replied that a woman had come to her house, but it was the same one who had stolen his gun. She asked if he was aware of that since she had tried to kill him. Hanfen was shocked. He realized she was talking about Ruina. He urgently told her not to open the door for Ruina, because she wasn't the one he was expecting. Immediately Hanfen and Zivi rushed back home, knowing they had to find Shiwang first, but as they moved, they heard loud noises. Taiyan was shouting orders, telling the injured elderly women and children to go up the left staircase, while the rest were to take up arms and gather in the basement. He warned that if they allowed the invaders in, they would lose their supplies, and then all their families would die. Disguising themselves within the crowd, Hanfen and Zivi noticed that Zhang Hu's group was fighting against them. Meanwhile, Riona was watching Hanfen's house, wondering if he had moved, since it was completely silent. At that moment, Nurse Kim appeared and asked what Riona was doing there. Riona replied that she had come looking for some food, but Nurse Kim questioned why she had brought so many people with her. In return, Riona asked what Kim was doing there. Nurse Kim explained that she was there to treat someone. Riona then wondered if Hanfen was sick. However, some men tried to take Nurse Kim's supplies. Kim asked what they thought they were doing, reminding them that Ziyu had ordered them not to interfere with her, but the men grabbed her anyway. What they didn't was that she was incredibly strong. She tossed them around like dolls and told them she didn't care what they were doing, as long as they didn't interfere with her. But then Ruina drew a knife, stabbing Kim and calling her a monster, declaring that the girl was much stronger, so everyone had to be careful. But when they all drew their knives to attack Kim, every blade was suddenly sucked into Shin's black hole. Her black hole was so powerful it nearly pulled everyone inside. Meanwhile, Zhang Hu's group was beating everyone from the committee. Hanfen and Ziwi were almost caught by Young Jijai. Hanfen complained that he had only punched him once, so there was no reason for him to keep chasing them this far. He thought to himself that he had never imagined the purple light would be so useful in that situation. But just then they were surrounded. Han Fin said he needed to come up with something quickly. He told Zieri to go find the evil queen as fast as possible, promising they would meet later at the agreed location. Zieri asked how Han Fin planned to handle everything alone, but Han Fin told him not to worry. Han Fin climbed onto a car demanding everyone's attention. He declared that he was the one who raised the prices so they would starve and then flipped his middle finger at everyone there. Enraged, the crowd rushed toward him. Han Fin thought the entrance to the parking lot could be blocked by the metal gate, but it was weakened by the accumulated snow. At that moment one of the men punched him, but Han Fin channeled his purple light into the gate. People stared in shock, asking what the hell that glowing light was. Suddenly the light vanished, and Han Fin taunted them, daring the bastards to come at him. But just then the gate finally gave way under the pressure of the snow, triggering a massive avalanche inside the parking lot. Emerging from the snow, Han Fin realized that after using the purple power, he didn't even feel tired. Maybe he was getting used to it. But standing in front of him was the mysterious old man. Alarmed, Han Fin wondered why he felt that man had been watching him all this time. The old man quickly grabbed him and dragged him to safety. Once secure, Han Fin demanded to know who the hell he was. The man introduced himself as Lin Zhenhao. Han Fin was shocked and asked if he was the one fighting against Su Yu. Zhenhao confirmed it, extending his hand toward Han Fin. Han Fin didn't quite understand the gesture, but Zhenhao explained that he was proposing cooperation, saying he had changed his mind. Han Fin grew suspicious, asking if Zhenhao was just trying to trick him, but Zhenhao clarified it was simply two sides getting what they wanted. He told Han Fin to be direct, yes or no. Han Fin thought to himself that if this man fought by his side, their chances of victory would increase greatly. So though he admitted he didn't trust him, their goals were the same. He accepted the partnership. The scene shifted to the lower floor where Taeyeon announced that the convoy was ready and they could move up to collect the people. He reported that the first level gate had been forced open by the snow, the temperature was dropping rapidly and the crowd was now scattered. He also mentioned something about two men, but Yu dismissed it, saying it would not affect their plan. Han Fin asked why there were military jeeps inside their complex, and when they had arrived, Sanhao explained that those people were outsiders, and he had heard that Shuyu was planning to transfer people. Han Fin demanded to know where Shuyu intended to take them. After all, outside was nothing but ice. Suddenly Zanhao dashed forward, saying he would leave Shuyu in Han Fin's hands. Making noise, he drew everyone's attention, causing them to wonder if there was an intruder. Sanhao then began taking down everyone nearby. Han Fin seized the chance, pointing his gun at Zuyu's head, but Zuyu wasn't surprised. He calmly said he had been expecting Han Fin. Han Fin asked how he had known he would come. Zuyu explained that before the cold disaster, he had managed to stockpile vast amounts of supplies. At first he had thought Han Fin was just one of their contacts, but later realized he had been mistaken. He then told Han Fin to take a closer look at the inside of his pistol. At that moment Han Fin noticed there was a listening device hidden in the weapon. Rishiri explained that otherwise he never would have returned the gun to him in the first place. He knew exactly what Han Fin had been doing all along. Han Fin asked what he was supposed to do now, still wondering who the they was that Rishiryu kept mentioning. But Rishiryu told him not to worry. If he had wanted to kill Han Fin, he would have done so already. He admitted Han Fin was a very clever man, and said he hoped Han Fin would join them. As long as people continued to be sent their way, they could survive. But Han Fin refused, declaring he would never become Suyu's guinea pig. Suyu sighed, saying it was a pity. At that moment several special forces soldiers appeared in front of Han Fin. The soldiers started shooting at Han Fin, who immediately ran. At that moment, Zanha pulled him aside. Han Fin shouted, asking what the hell they were doing since they needed to escape, but Zanha told him not to panic. It was only 3 special forces soldiers. He said he would distract them so Han Fin could get away. Then Zanha rushed at the soldiers and beat them all down with ease, making Han Fin realize that this man was definitely not ordinary. Sakuryu declared that it was already too late. They needed to drive the vehicles and gather the people, but Hanfin, using his purple ability, insisted that he wasn't going anywhere. He turned the ground beneath them soft. One of the soldiers threw a grenade directly at Hanfin, hitting him head-on. Hanfin suddenly found himself waking in his psychotic goat world. In front of him was a bizarre giant goat that grabbed him by the tongue. His body began melting away, revealing even his skeleton. Rising again, his eyes glowed completely green. Meanwhile, Tyan said it was lucky the car was high-powered, otherwise they never could have escaped. But then with a blood-red aura, Hanfin destroyed the car with just one hand. Tyan pointed his gun at him, asking what the hell he was. Hanfin destroyed the weapon with his red aura too, shattering both the gun and Tyan's clothes. Now exposed in the freezing cold, Tyan was on the verge of freezing to death. Seeing his brother in danger, Takyu rushed at Hanfin with an iron bar, but Hanfin shattered it easily. Then, without even acknowledging him, Hanfin walked past and headed for one of the military jeeps. Using his purple light, he made the vehicle collapse like a deflated balloon. A soldier fired directly at Hanfin's face, but the bullet only grazed him and healed instantly. Realizing they had no more ammunition, the soldiers began fleeing in terror. Zhenhao, watching from a distance, wondered what in the world Suyu was doing. Meanwhile, Hanfin rampaged through everyone in his path, destroying them one by one, but he burned through so much energy that he eventually collapsed unconscious. Seizing the opportunity, Tyan declared he would kill that monster, but Zhenhao struck him hard in the face, stopping him, then caught Hanfin's limp body and asked if he had completely lost control. Just then, Siyu arrived with a gun and several others. When they got there, they found all the soldiers dead, while Taiyu had frozen to death. Siyu announced that their men were gone and they still didn't know the location of the main camp. The plan had failed, so he ordered everyone to return home. The scene shifted to Hanfin waking up in shock, muttering about a grenade coming his way, only to realize he wasn't dead. Confused, he asked where he was. Zhenhao told him he had finally returned to normal. Hanfin didn't fully understand what that meant, and asked if they weren't still on the second basement level. Zhenhao replied that Hanfin didn't even know himself, so how could he possibly answer that? Still, Zhenhao said he had an idea about Zhuyu's plan. He pointed at a man tied up nearby, explaining that the soldier would give them details. He had earlier claimed to be sent from the base to negotiate with Yu. Zhenhao demanded to know what the negotiations were about. The soldier admitted they were trading residents in exchange for weapons and food. Hanfin angrily asked what the people were being exchanged for. The soldier explained it was to help build the base. Hanfin retorted that he had to be joking. The soldier insisted it was for rebuilding civilization and saving humanity, so they weren't doing anything wrong. Zhenhao broke one of the soldier's fingers, asking what would happen if he failed his mission, and whether more powerful people would come after them. The soldier said he didn't understand what Zhenhao meant, but Hanfin thought to himself that judging by the soldier's behavior, it was very likely that this base did have advanced ability users. Looking at how organized the base seemed, they were probably enemies. Still, Hanfin thought Zhenhao was being unnecessarily cruel. He told him there was no need to kill the soldier now, but Zhenhao scoffed, asking if Hanfin really believed that nonsense about saving people. He warned Hanfin not to be so naive. It was just another faction in the apocalypse. They had only two choices: take them down or leave to find another shelter. Hanfin replied that he would return to discuss this with the others. As he left, he thought Zhenhao was insane and wondered what kind of man he really was, but if what the Special Forces soldier said was true, then finding a base outside could be the safer option. He also remembered seeing some military jeeps and a large excavator downstairs, though he couldn't recall exactly in which section. Just then, someone appeared behind him, preparing to attack, but at that moment, Hanfin prepared to defend himself with his powers, but just as he was about to attack, he realized it was the nurse, Ziwi. After that, they explained everything that had happened. Ziwi said that the bastard Shiwi was using the neighbors in exchange for supplies. Then he asked if sending people to an organization where they might survive wouldn't actually be a good thing. Hanfin replied that helping to build a base was just the soldier's word. If it were truly a good thing, Shio and the others would have already gone there to seek refuge. He added that there were many things that couldn't be explained, but they also couldn't fully believe or completely disbelieve what was said, especially since they didn't even know if a base really existed. Zivi asked what would happen if someone really did come there, but Hanfin said that would have to wait. If they couldn't find transportation, they wouldn't be able to leave. So they began searching the jeeps for useful tools. After some time, Hanfin found several weapons and told them to call the black hole girl as quickly as possible, but they wondered what those two had been doing there. When they went to check, they noticed a huge piece of cloth. Gwen said she heard a sound coming from behind it. Hanfin asked the girl if she had a strong flashlight. She said yes and lit the area. Together, Hanfin and Ziwi pulled the giant cloth aside and discovered an enormous cavern. Hanfin thought to himself that to dig such a massive tunnel in secret, those people were probably not ordinary at all. What the soldier had said was only the tip of the iceberg. Their community truly wasn't safe. Hanfin noted that the place resembled the drainage pipes of the community. When the girl tried to enter, Hanfin stopped her, telling her not to go inside because it was dangerous. They needed to go back first. The scene shifted as they prepared to enter the tunnel later. After gathering some items, Hanfin asked them to pack more weapons, some food seeds and a piece of raw pork for him. Then he said they would explore the tunnel this time, but if there was an emergency, they should retreat immediately. Hanfin noticed that the girl had become much more skilled at using her special ability. She could now easily retrieve whatever items she wanted from her space. He told her to stay in that hidden room, because it was well concealed. He even reinforced the walls and door so that even if someone found it, they wouldn't be able to get inside easily. Hanfin and Ziwi then headed toward the tunnel. The girl muttered that the true eye of the evil king will protect his apostle. Hanfin had no idea what that crazy talk was supposed to mean. Meanwhile, he was thinking that in the current situation, the threat they faced wasn't just Shu Yu but possibly also whatever was inside that tunnel. Since the community was no longer safe, this tunnel might lead to a new survival point. Either way, they had to investigate first. Inside the giant tunnel, Ziwi said he thought it would be warmer, but it seemed just as cold as outside. Hanfin explained that everything there was frozen, and he couldn't understand how they had built it so quickly. They walked for an hour through the tunnel, passing several branching passages. Zivi complained that they were just walking in circles underground. He had even lost his sense of direction. Senfrin pointed out that judging by the pipe distribution, one side looked like a residential area. As for the other side, he wasn't sure what it was. After walking a bit further, they found a sewer distribution map. Zivi noted that they had walked so far they were already close to the neighboring communities, and just ahead was the stadium. Suddenly Hanfin told him to turn off his headlamp. A few vehicles drove past them. Zivi whispered that those cars seemed to be heading toward the Hanfin community. Hanfin said they looked like military trucks, probably connected to the 3 soldiers they had encountered. Zivi guessed that maybe they were transporting people to build the base. Hanfin suggested they should follow the vehicles, since they might discover something important, but Zivi disagreed, saying they didn't need to follow them because there was a back entrance. He explained that a year ago an elderly woman from the Hanshin community had fallen into the sewer, and he had been the one to rescue her. Hanfin asked if he really remembered the location after so much time. Zavori confidently answered that of course he did. He had an excellent memory and had been one of the top students in high school. However, when they reached the place, the door was completely frozen shut. Zavori admitted he might have been mistaken, so he tried searching a bit further. He failed at several attempts but eventually managed to open one of the sewer covers. They climbed out and realized they were now in the underground parking lot of the Hanun community, where they found several dead people, and it looked like there had been a fight there, while others were building a wall. Guarding those workers were some soldiers. One of them complained that guarding the place was miserable, since they had been stationed there even before the tunnel was completed. Hanfin said that the people of the community were probably being controlled by those soldiers, but then Ziwi noticed that the ground was shaking. The soldiers ordered everyone to step back, saying the tunnel was breaking apart. At that moment the tunnel collapsed and a man with glowing green eyes emerged from within. Sivi wondered if that giant was a human or a ghost, but Hanfen realized it was no coincidence such a massive tunnel had been dug without the community knowing. He understood how dangerous it was to stay there. If they were discovered, they would certainly be killed. The giant man asked where his snack was, but the soldier replied that the tunnel hadn't even been cleared yet, there was no food there. The man slammed the ground demanding food. With all the dust that rose, Zivi sneezed, and in that moment they were discovered and had to run. As they fled through the tunnel, the giant chased after them. With a single slap to the ground, he shattered the floor beneath their feet. Hanfen realized this was the perfect opportunity and activated his purple ability, turning the ground soft. The giant identified him as an advanced user. Hanfen then combined his purple light with the green energy, trapping the giant in the ground, but he noticed the giant was about to break free. At that moment, Ziri appeared with an iron bar and struck him. Instead of helping, it only enraged the giant further, who roared that they were surely going to die now. The two of them had no choice but to run again. Suddenly the ceiling collapsed, blocking the path. Hanfen said they needed to escape quickly, but they also had to determine their approximate location. Zivi reassured him, saying not to worry. His sense of direction was excellent and he had already memorized the underground map. After 40 minutes of walking, they seemed completely lost, but Hanfen noticed a draft of wind coming from above. Following it, they saw a faint light ahead. Climbing the slippery walls, they finally reached the outside. Hanfen looked around and realized that the tall building nearby was Jinfen Tower, the tallest building 5 kilometers north of their community. That meant they had gone the wrong way. He explained that the Shinfu community was located along the 3rd southern ring road of Hanchuan, but they were nearly at the 4th northern ring road of the city. The only way to return to their community was by land, which meant passing through the Shin district. Since the altitude there was higher, returning today was unlikely. Ziri told him not to worry. Once they reached Jinshan, he had many connections there. He had also traveled snowy roads like these many times before. But just as he said that, he sank into the snow. Hanfen told him they needed to slow down, but he also thought the snow was getting heavier. They needed to find shelter for the night as soon as possible. While walking, Ziwi said they were only 3 kilometers from Jinan, and in about an hour they would be there. But Hanfen noted the snowfall was worsening, so they needed to quicken their pace. As they walked, they came across frozen corpses. It looked like those people had run out of food because they trusted too much and hadn't found any supplies when they left. A sudden snowstorm struck and without shelter they froze to death. Sakuri warned that it was best to stop for the night, or else they might freeze to death as well. Hanfen agreed. Eventually they arrived at a village area in Jinshan that hadn't yet been swallowed by heavy snow. Hanfen wondered about the people inside. Then they saw someone approaching. Hanfen asked if these were the connections Sakuri had mentioned. Ziwi told him to wait while he went to ask, but Hanfen felt uneasy. This couldn't be good. Suddenly 2 armed men surrounded Ziwi, ordering him not to move. It was a robbery. When Hanfen reached for his gun, one of the men shouted at him not to move and demanded he hand over everything he had. Hanfen thought that if he fought back now with his healing ability, he might be able to withstand a gunshot, but most likely, Ziwi would be killed. While they were walking handcuffed, Hanfen asked why they were being kept there since the men had already taken all their supplies. The man replied that there was a reason why they were being taken along. Hanfen thought the place was impressive, as it gave a clear view of almost the entire urban area of Hanchuan City. When they arrived at a residence, the man used a remote control on the gate, and to Hanfen's surprise it actually opened. He was astonished, since the entire city was without power. It was unlikely that this place had electricity, so it had to be running on a generator. Hanfen noted that the villas looked recently built, but wondered how only 2 people could have managed such construction. He thought that if they could defeat those men and secure the place with his abilities and the Black Hole Girl's powers, they could turn it into a fortress. The man noticed Hanfen smiling and asked why the hell he was grinning. He ordered them to hurry up and dig out the place. When the job was done, he promised not only to let them go but also to return their supplies. Hanfen asked if he was telling the truth, and the man swore he was, but warned him not to try anything. Then he told his companion to watch the 2 of them. Shasi, clearly frustrated, muttered that the guy did nothing but boss him around. He then ordered Hanfin and Ziwi to start working immediately, threatening to blow their heads off if they didn't. Hanfin reminded him that they were still tied up, but Ziwi snapped back that he didn't care, so the two began digging through the snow. Ziwi asked if they would really be released, but Hanfin admitted he wasn't so sure. Looking to the side, he saw several dead bodies buried in the snow, which terrified Ziwi. Hanfin told him to keep quiet or they'd be discovered. He added that they couldn't just sit there waiting to die. He had a plan. They began faking a fight between themselves. Shazi asked what the hell was going on, but the two kept arguing. He told them they could fight all they wanted, but the work had to be finished before sunset, otherwise he'd shoot them both. After a while, Hanfin and Ziwi managed to get inside the men's house. They pretended to be calm, then quickly turned the tables, handcuffing the two men instead. Hanfin said they were only there because of debt collection. Ziwi then asked if the bodies outside were their doing. The men denied any involvement. Hanfin said that if they hadn't killed anyone, they could leave. Ziwi was shocked and asked if Hanfin actually believed them. Hanfin replied, "Of course not," and forced the two men to go outside naked. Even Ziwi remarked that Hanfin was like the devil himself. But Hanfin insisted they needed to return immediately. He had originally planned to check the tunnel and leave, but because of these delays, they were already far behind schedule. He had no idea what was happening in the community now, but hoped everyone was safe. The scene shifted. Someone said that Hanfin and Ziwi were taking too long, and perhaps something had happened to them. But the black hole girl said not to worry about Hanfin. He was chosen by the true eye of the evil king, and he wouldn't die so easily. Zenma then pointed out that instead of worrying about them, they should focus on their own situation. After Hanfin entered the tunnel, an army had come out, accompanied by a terrifying person with the power to control the earth itself. Chuyu seemed to have a good relationship with that army, and now the whole community was obedient to them. Hanfin and his allies had become public enemies. Chuyu was likely mobilizing people to hunt them down. Zenma cursed the foolish residents for believing they would be saved by the soldiers, not realizing they had already been sold out for death. But the girl said she didn't care whether it was true or false. Even if she had doubts, they couldn't do anything now. Obedience was their best chance at survival. That was human nature. Suddenly the girl fell asleep and someone covered her, warning that she could catch a cold if she wasn't careful. Senga thought about how troublesome it was to carry dead weight around, but he also reflected on her words, choosing obedience. He remembered a flashback of himself fighting a man while his trainer shouted for him to dodge as he had taught him. The trainer said he hadn't trained Zenga just to stand there and get beaten, but Zenga lost that fight. His trainer humiliated him, asking if he wanted to go back to his old life. Back in the present, Zenha turned to the girls and said,